I think it's visiting me in my dreams again. I've only ever had one truly strange experience, and I think it's happening again. Last year, at the beginning of the summer, I had some nightmares. Not your basic wake up sweating and go back to sleep after a bit nightmares, but the kind of nightmares that feel so vivid and real that you genuinely believe that your life is in danger. The first night, I awoke to find myself in a clearing in the woods. I remember looking around confused by my surroundings before noticing the noise, rather the lack of any. The woods in the summer are typically teeming with sound in the middle of the night. Cicadas, crickets, tree frogs, general ambient natural sounds. However, in this dream, the only thing I could hear was my own pulse. It was elevated, but I wasn't quite sure why. At that time, I wasn't one who was afraid of the forest. Then I heard it, a rustling of the fallen leaves on the forest floor. Again, typically this isn't anything new, as I'm used to hearing squirrels and such walking around in their habitat. But the fact that this was the only sound I heard made it seem ominous. I felt the urge to run and hide, but not knowing exactly why. However, I didn't question my sixth sense, and I hid behind a tree. I remember noticing how the rustling sound immediately became louder as I moved behind the trunk. I held my breath, terrified, and as the noise came closer and closer, I found myself praying to any deity who'd listen to grant me salvation. Right as I saw the brush at the edge of the clearing rustling, I woke up, gasping for breath. I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed my face with cold water, trying to calm down. The sun was beginning to rise, so I figured I might as well stay awake. However, I couldn't put my finger on why I was so frightened. After all, nothing really scary happened. The next night I awoke in that forest clearing again. But I didn't recognize my surroundings at the time. It felt in the dream like an entirely new experience. Again, there was no noise, but again, I suddenly heard the rustling. This time, though, instead of starting on the distance, it started from right behind me. I whirled around terrified and saw a shadow mere inches from me. I screamed and woke up, my pulse pounding in my head and my throat dry. I remember thinking at the time that the shadow had the same shape as Slender Man, that old Creepypasta guy. Again, I went to the bathroom and got a drink of water. Looking at my haggard reflection in the mirror, I walked back to my bedroom and tried to go back to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow again. I didn't see any of its features, but just the thought of its unnaturally tall, skinny shape petrified me. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, while I was working, I suddenly realized the similarities between the two dreams, but brushed it off as some creepy coincidence. That night I fell asleep easily, convinced that there was no chance that I'd have a nightmare a third night in a row. After all, nightmares are very rare occurrences for me. I woke up from a dreamless sleep in the night and immediately noticed that my bedroom door was open, exposing the dark hallway beyond. I had remembered closing it before bed and naturally was puzzled, but not really scared. It was then that I noticed it, a figure standing still at the end of the hallway, almost invisible in the darkness. It was the same shape as that shadow in my dreams. Tall, lanky, long arms. I squinted, trying to deduce whether or not my eyes were playing tricks on me, desperately hoping that they were. Suddenly the figure took a slow step towards me. I jolted awake, for real this time, letting out a loud scream as I did. My dog looked up at me confused, but after a moment he laid his head down and went back to sleep. While drinking some water from the sink, I noticed dark circles under my eyes, unsure if they'd been there before. I didn't try to go back to sleep. I turned on the lights in my bedroom and researched reoccurring dreams until it was dawn. All I found were differing solutions to get rid of these dreams, but no concrete method. It seemed as if dreams aren't quite fully understood by scientists, let alone normal people. I slept on the couch that night, figuring that switching up my sleeping location could switch up my dreams. It felt as if I had just tentatively closed my eyes when I awoke. It was nearly pitch black, but something was different. I looked down at my feet and nearly had a heart attack when I saw it again. That figure was sitting at the foot of my couch, facing away from me. I froze, not daring to move a muscle. Barely breathing, my gaze fixed on that shape. Strangely, I noticed that it didn't appear to have any hair on its head. After a few minutes, I began to hear it speaking. It was whispering quickly, and while I could make out specific noises, it didn't sound like any kind of language that I was familiar with. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The thing sat straight up, and as it began to turn to look me in the eye, I screamed as loud as I'd ever screamed before. I felt my throat burning as I woke up in a panic. This time, the creature wasn't there. I realized that it was just a dream, but was too panicked to be that thankful. I threw off my blanket and ran around my small house, turning every light on. I breathed a sigh of relief when that was done, but I still felt tense. Turning on the TV, I stared blankly at the screen for a few hours until morning. That day, I visited a psychic. I was never a big believer in any of that supernatural stuff, but I was at my wit's end. She was no help. When I asked her about my dream visitor, she recommended this special miracle tea she made. Only $15 a bag. I stormed out. That night, I took some of my own miracle tea, lots of beer, and drifted to sleep. I was pleasantly surprised when I awoke on my own from no nightmares and saw no figure on my bed. Running my fingers through my hair, I walked to the bathroom, noticing that it was nearly dawn. But I glanced at myself in the mirror again. I saw it. Right behind my reflection was the reflection of what I can only assume was its face. Large, milky white eyes, no lips, a gaping hole where the nose should have been, pale gray skin, torn and scarred in places. It was the most horrid, terrifying thing I had ever seen. I screamed and jolted awake. For real this time. I was done. I grabbed my dog, a few articles of clothing, and my wallet, and stormed into the garage, driving away as the sun began to rise. For the next few nights, I stayed with a friend who lives in a more urban area than the rural setting of my house, sleeping on his couch, happy to catch up on my lost sleep and experiencing no more nightmares. On the night of the fourth day, I had decided that it was time to return home, confident that my fit of night terrors had passed. I parked my car in the garage and, stepping outside to gather the mass of newspapers that had accumulated over the past 4 days, I noticed that the woods which circle my house were silent. Before I could react, a branch snapping broke the absence of sound. I quickly swiveled my head to look, and there it was, the thing from my dreams. It was tall and thin, its papery skin stretched over its bones, and it was quickly stepping through the brush at the edge of my lawn, towards me. I sprinted inside, forgetting the newspapers, and dialed 911 as fast as I could, screaming to the operator that there was someone stalking me, and they were outside my house. I proceeded to hide under my bed, gasping for air. The house began to shake, as if something was throwing itself against the outer sides. Suddenly I heard sirens coming down my driveway, as well as the squeal of tires on pavement. There seemed to be a good deal of commotion outside. I heard yelling and radio chatter and more sirens, and eventually the cops knocked on my door. For the next few hours I was assaulted with questions from the police officers at the station. Who is your stalker? When did you begin to notice them? I didn't have many answers, and neither did they. When I asked them if they saw anything, the cops just looked at each other and shook their heads. Finally, I was free to go. but they kept warning me to avoid my house for a while and suggested I considered moving. I haven't been back to that house since, and despite frequent calls to the chief of police in that town, my questions were never clearly answered. It feels like they're keeping something from me, but I'm not sure if I want to know what. I hired a moving team to empty my house, and I pretty much let the realtor handle the selling process entirely. I now am living closer to the nearest city, and while there are still trees in my yard, it feels much more suburban than middle of nowhere rural. I thought I had escaped that period of my life and had chalked up the experience to hallucinations from a lack of sleep and stress. That is, until last night. I dreamt I was in that silent forest again, alone in the dark. Upon hearing the faraway rustling of what I assumed to be that creature, I woke up sweating and panting, once again relieved that it was a dream. However, when I finally rolled out of bed, I noticed that my feet were covered in dirt. I really don't know what to make of all of this, and I'm really afraid that this whole terrifying process is beginning again. If anyone has any suggestions as to what I should do or any information at all, please let me know. What the hell is that? But I'm awake! Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's Creepypasta from the subreddit No Sleep. This post was made by Reddit user PinkyToeStepper69. I'll be sure to supply a link to the original post from Reddit into the description below. Please let me know what you thought of tonight's upload in the comments section. This is Creepypasta number 3 for the channel. We'll have more to come. Till then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening and sleep tight. Also, guys, as you know, I don't make anything on this channel, but I have opened up a merchandise store to help me with to make a little bit of money so I can buy more books, because these books are very expensive when I have to track them down. Also, there's some really cool stuff here in the new merch store that you might enjoy, so please support the channel and get some cool shirts and hoodies, phone cases, pillows, all kinds of stuff. Coffee mugs, sweaters. I think you'll really enjoy it, guys. I'm going to put a link in the description below to my new merchandise store, the 80s Slasher Librarian merch store. I hope you guys will order something and walk around in slasher style.